Let's start our next session. It's a very interesting question. Why did we delete our regression suite? We have Deepak Parmasivam and Sneha Vijay Raghavan from ThoughtWorks. Let's see how they answer this question.
Hello everyone, I'm Sneha. I'm a QA. I have been in ThoughtWorks for the past 1 year. And let Deepak introduce him.
Deepak, been with ThoughtWorks for almost 4 years, and previously I was working for Cognizant, so almost all the time doing automation. So last 1 year or 1.5 years, I've been doing a lot of cleanup works. I've been deleting a lot of things. So this is one of the biggest deletion that I did. So probably we'll talk why did we went about going about deleting our questions.
So before going to why did we delete our regression suite, let me throw a basic question. Why do you think we need a regression suite?
So it's open to you guys.
Verify it's working, it's still working.
App is fine.
Yeah, after enhancement or defect fix, if the previous functionalities are still working or not.
If the version change of the app, we need to test it, at least the basic functionality, that it is working fine, it is not breaking anything else.
Also, it has not introduced a new defect. Also, if the previous defect have re-emerged. Basic reasons for regression.
Good. So if I sum it up, like to give us peace of mind, basically. Yeah. After any change, it should give us peace of mind that we can go into release with saying that app is stable and the dev team is not developing on a defective application. Fine.
So since we all agree to whatever Deepak said, that it gives us peace of mind and all that, why did we delete our regression suite? Because it was not doing what we expected it to do.
So basically it was not giving us peace of mind, it was giving us a lot of trouble. Probably in the future slide we will talk about why it was giving us trouble. Okay.
So let's start it from the day one of the app. So this is how it looked initially. There was a single Java service, a DB, and a front-end Rails app. So the architecture was very simple and minimal, and we had tests.
So the reason why did we had a Rails app and a Java services? So we wanted a backend system that was real quick, and we wanted to develop our front end real quick. So Rails suited our thing for helped us quick the front end very quickly, and Java was performant in terms of backend. So we went with this mixed approach, and how did we went about testing it?
So this is all we had. This was the end-to-end test. So we just hit the app using the web, and we'll load the data and just verify the response. That's the minimal end-to-end test that we had.
Basically, it was we just leveraged whatever Rails test framework it provided. So we used Cucumber, Capybara, and Selenium, and we were hitting the app. And to load the data, since we didn't have any database here in the Rails side, we had the database in the Java side. So we were not able to use the migration script or the dev test builders. Okay, so we had to create our own active models to load the database. So we created our own active models. We had created our own factory girl, on top of the active models to load the database. So what our test do is it sets up the data into the database, and using Selenium we hit the Firefox and test the app. So this is how the end-to-end test was existing. So this is how we started.
Like Deepak said, this is how we started. So with time, how did our application actually evolve? There were a lot of change in requirements, added functionalities, and the system architecture looked something like this. There were like few Java services, few DBs, R, Solar. So all of this would interact with the Rails app.
So basically what R is actually a statistical analytical engine. So it churns millions of data and gives you input. So give you whatever question you ask to it in a matter of seconds. Okay, so we had R service, and apart from that we had Solar. Solar is a search engine. So whatever we wanted to search across our application, Solar is integrated with all these databases. Okay, so we were doing the searching using Solar, and apart from that, added complexity was each of these DBs had internal schemas within themselves. Okay, so we had data migration scripts. So we will have an input DB where we set the data, and we have to run the migration scripts that will populate the tables that the services actually uses. So though this DB looks like a single component, it had multiple things within itself.
So apart from what Deepak said, the services also interacted among themselves. So there was interaction going on even between the services. So I'll move on to, so though the architecture changed, it evolved, we were still living with the same end-to-end test with the same set of regression and stuff.
So this is almost after 2 years. So the first state is the day one, and this state is almost after 2 years. Even after 2 years, like a traditional test automation, we are setting up the data in the database, and we are testing here the Rails app through Capybara and Cucumber. So what was the problem? Why did cockroach survive across centuries? Okay, the reason is it evolved. It keep evolving. If you spray a hit on it today, it might die, but over a period of time, it would grow resistance over the hit spray, and in 4 years later, it will not die. So these guys has to keep upgrading to match up cockroach. So we didn't evolved with the application, so we had to die.
So going back, when we had a regression suite, this is how our tests look like. We had almost 100 tests, out of which 40 were ignored for various reasons like valid defects, work in progress, removed functionality, and also failing tests. There would be like 40 tests passing and 20 flaky tests for some similar reasons.
So these 20 flaky tests, they might either pass or they might either fail. So this is a typical thing that you could see in the long running project that had ran for 2 years or 3 years, where they just go with this end-to-end approach. And these flaky tests, they can either be because of actual test application, test failure, or app might be actually failing, or the functionality might have changed. We would not know what is the reason these 20 tests are failing. So we have to spend effort in finding why these tests are failing, and we have to fix it appropriately to get the build green.
So what is this 40 minutes effect? So as I said, we had like 100 tests in our regression suite, and that would take 40 minutes to run. So what would ideally happen is, for the build to actually respond, it was taking 40 minutes. For the build to go red or to go green, it would take 40 minutes. So there could be multiple commits in those 40 minutes. So it was difficult to track down which person's check-in broke the build.
So basically, since the build was taking almost 40 minutes to run completely, none of the devs would run these tests in their local. So when they are making a commit, they are not ensuring the build is green. Okay, so they would push it into the CI system, and they would let the CI system to decide whether the application is fine or not. And as Neha said, so in the 40 minutes gap, there might be 4 or 5 commits that would have came in, and if I see a build failing, that might be because of 4 or 5 commits, and I'll not be able to pinpoint which developer had broken which test. So it ended up like QA spent time in figuring out devs too got fed up with build being red always, and QAs had to look into the defects and see look into the failures and see why the test failed, and we have to fix it.
So I think the color would have indicated what we are trying to tell. So this is about having a red build. So why would we even need a build? To give us some good feedback about how is the app working properly and things like that. But over a time, if the build remains to be red, we probably stop getting that feedback.
So here is this popular story, like if a cow looks purple in color, okay, so we are used to seeing cows in black and white, and all of a sudden if you see a curve in a purple color, it will get your attention. Okay, so but if you keep seeing black and white curves, you will not get your attention like that. If your build remains red forever, it will never get anyone's attention. Okay, so only if it remains green for a long time, and if it turns red, only then it will get attention. So what is wrong with having this red build is, we will not know whether the build is failed because of app or is it because of test. Okay, and as I talked already, like we had spent a lot of effort in getting this build running and getting this green. Okay, and okay.
So this is how typically a day in a tester's life look like. So we'll spend a majority of time fixing and validating the failures, sometime in fighting with the devs for not fixing those tests, sometime writing new tests, and yeah, sometime also doing manual testing. In the end, it was like, hey Ram.
Why did God send me into the earth as a tester? So here I want to talk about why did fixing the failing test and writing new test took us a lot of time. Probably you might have understood by now like why we took so much time in validating the failures and fixing test. I would have explained that enough. Now writing test, it is taking a major amount of time. So as I told earlier, so what we were doing was devs had their own migration scripts, and we had our own active models to populate data into the DB. Okay, so what happens was, whenever devs are making any change in their database, so if they are introducing a new table, we have to introduce a new model into our active models. If they are introducing a foreign key or a primary key, or if they are changing any relation, we have to catch up the same with our active models. Actually, we are not able to do this. So whenever a test fails, rather than looking into is it a functionality failure or is it test failure, how to also look into should I update my database also. There's another new dimension that comes in altogether, and if in a regular case if it takes some 10 minutes to fix a test, now in this case it takes almost 20 minutes. The two testers, we don't have enough knowledge on what's happening with the database, so it takes us a lot of time to do it. And also when I'm starting to write a new test, how to understand what are the changes that had went into the new database changes that had happened. Only then I'd be able to write a new test, adding corresponding things into the active models. So the end conclusion is we had spent a lot of effort here, but we are not getting any valid feedback. So it was giving us a lot of trouble rather than peace of mind. So what we decided was, okay, we would delete our regression suite. Okay, but our tech lead or our clients will not spare us. So we had to come up with a different approach. So what we did, okay, so we got a big problem. We got a huge system that we had to test, and we didn't know how. Okay, so we drew inspiration from Britishers. So when they came into India, they had a big country to conquer, and they didn't know how. So they sent some Lord XYZ to analyze India, and he goes back and tells a report, okay, it's a huge country, true, but you can easily conquer if you divide and rule it. Okay, so you know the rest of the history. So we decided to do the same. So what we did was, we decided to divide and test it. So first I would explain you what do we mean by divide and testing with a simple example of a calculator. Okay, and we will go in and see how did we apply this approach into our complex system.
So as Deepak pointed it out, we are going to explain it with the example of a simple calculator. So what would a calculator basically do? Get input and just that be front end that will get the input for you, and the back end engine that will do the calculation and return the values to you. This will be the simple user flow. So how do we do the end-to-end test in this? So we'll just feed the data, we let the back end engine calculate and give us the value, and we'll be just validating it.
So if we take a simple calculation, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, we will just fill in we'll just feed in 2 plus 2 in here, and we will see if 4 is coming up. Okay. So now here is how we went about the divide and testing. So we tested the display separately and we tested the engine separately. So what we would do is, rather than the engine, we would remove the engine actually, and we replace it with this term. Okay, it's a dumb terminal. So whenever it receives an input called 2 plus 2, it simply returns 4. Okay, so what we did is, through this guy we would pass 2 plus 2, and if it reaches the system, it had responded with a 4, and we would see if it is coming up in the display. Let's assume when I press 2 plus 2, and if it is not passing that output into this guy, it will not give 4 back. So something is wrong with either the display or with the touchpad. Similarly, we did it with the calculation engine. What we did was, we simulated the input to the engine and we validated the output. So if something is wrong with the engine, you'd be able to catch it here. So if it is not doing the calculation right, you'd be able to catch it here. So so most of us, we are used to testing it in end-to-end fashion. Now that I had said, like, we had broken this into 2 pieces. Now if you guys feel like would have missed any scenario that you would fail to cover in this, do you guys have any thoughts that any scenario that you would fail to cover in this approach?
Maybe integration of modes.
True. So it come to that in our later part of the thing. Apart from that,
Considering this example, okay, let's say your regressions would have, attempts to basically do a validation of, a division, feature. Let's say, your application is being built and, you have now introduced a percentage feature in the calculator. Okay, and this division was, part of a regression test suite. Okay, so how using this approach, basically you were able to benefit, by deleting your regression suite?
okay. So so this simple system, it doesn't explain what is the advantage we get out of divide and testing. Probably when I go into our real application, you would start seeing the value of dividing and testing it.
So can you just re-explain, because I didn't understand this whole diagram.
Okay, so good. So this is our system. Okay, this is a touch input and a display, and this is our calculation engine. So this guy is doing this 2 plus 2 or all mathematical things this guy does, and this guy just takes the input and shows the output. So what we did, we removed the engine here and we have a dumb terminal. Okay, this guy will not do any calculation at all. If he receives 2 plus 2, he'll simply return 4. I would have configured it to return 4 if it receives 2 plus 2. Okay, so when I enter 2 plus 2 here, if it reaches there, it will give me an output. If it doesn't reach there, it will not give output. And if 4 is not coming here, it either means that there is something wrong with my touch display or something is wrong with my the display.
So you mean to say you have written a code basically which will say, if you get 2 plus 2, you should display 4. Right?
It should return 4. This stub guy would return 4.
This is 500.
Yeah.
Right,
So everything is hard coded in this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
But this beats the purpose, right? I mean, the actual flow has to happen and then the 4 should come out of it, right?
So that's why I asked if you could come out with any scenario that this guy would not be able to catch. So if something is going wrong with the calculator, okay, I'd be able to catch it in this integration test. If something is going wrong with the display, I would be able to catch it here. So
So it is separated into 2.
exactly.
So I would say the intention of the things upstairs is just to verify the display. It's not about verifying the calculations. The one which is down is its intent is to verify the calculations. So up we are just verifying what is display acting correctly. Like if I press 2, there is 2 coming up. If I press 4, it's 4 coming up. That's the only intent of the regression suite that would be up.
But there is an overhead, right, of maintaining this stuff.
I'd come to that point. So this is very simple system, so we will not be able to see the advantage of doing testing like this. We would go into my real system and see. Okay, so this is a real system that we have, and okay, so this is how we divide and test. So just before going to that, here, okay, so we have to draw parallels between this Rails app with the touch display and these Java services with the app engine, the calculator engine.
So how did we change? Like he said, you'll have to draw parallels, and we'll just hit the Rails app, and we had stubbed all the backend service calls using Stubby4j. So what is Stubby4j? Stubby4j is an awesome tool, as Deepak says, developed by a thought worker. We would use to configure all the JSON endpoints and also capture the responses in that.
So if I have 10 services, I would capture all the endpoints in my 10 services. I would configure it in Stubby4j, and if I hit any of those endpoints, it would respond with a particular JSON that the actual application would respond me with. Okay.
Is Stubby4j just internal or it's open source?
It's an open source tool. Yeah. So you'll be able to find it in GitHub, like it's available. And so the test remained the same. Like we used the same UI test that we had already, and just that we had removed our data part. All the data setup parts we had removed, and yeah. So here is the advantage that comes here. So this test were taking almost 40 minutes for us to run. Now it is taking just 5 minutes for the entire test suite to get completed. Okay, that's a huge difference. The reason why it turned down to 5 minutes from 40 minutes is now I don't have to set up data, and as I told you, there are internal migration scripts that has to run for the DB to get configured completely. Okay, so that is not happening, and I'm cutting down the time taken for the actual services to do all the calculations and give me data. So I cut out all these things. Now I just have to test this Rails app, and I have this Stubby4j mocking all the other guys. And this 5 minutes, after it became 5 minutes, all the devs are running tests in their local. So whenever any test fails, they would fix it in their local, or if they commit into the CI, you would be able to catch it in the CI and ask the dev, pretty much we hadn't came into such a great level that when a build fails, dev fixes it, but we are slowly moving in there. So over a period of time, if the build fails, they would fix it.
So having said about the front end, I will go about the Java services and DB. So what would we do? We use the data builders written by the devs for unit tests to basically build the data, and we would verify the JSON structures using that. Or probably validate the endpoints using that.
So here we basically, again these tests ran less than a minute. Okay, for a service to complete, to test a service with all its endpoints, with all different combinations of data, it took less than a minute. So if you have 5 services, we are able to run all the 5 services in parallel. So the entire test suite, all these tests running for a minute, and my UI test taking another 5 minutes, it came down to 6 or 7 minutes. And another big advantage we have is now this service had become a separate component by itself. I can release this separate, I can test this component fully for its functionality, and I can go into production for just this component alone. Okay. Yeah. So basically these validating endpoints these are actually JSON responses, and we have JSON asserts to validate the output that we do. And we save a lot of time in setting up the data. So we reuse the data builders, as Sneha said. So previously we had our own active models, we had our own factory girl to set all the databases. Now these things comes to us for free. So if at all any dev, if he changes the data structure, he would update the data builders for his test to go through fine, for his unit test to work fine. So when that is the case, they would even so those changes will even get automatically applied to these tests. So the maintenance effort that's spent on maintaining these tests went down drastically. Okay, so these are the data migration tests. So as I told you, each DB internally they had different schemas within themselves. So to load these schemas, like we had to run data migration scripts. So what we did was to automate this process, to test this data migration scripts, we had a small, a minimalistic set of data dump, and we would run these scripts, and we would validate the table using the some SQL queries. So this again takes very less time. So you know how fast these queries would run, and this was very crucial for us. Reason being, Solar was directly integrating with these different services directly through databases. So if any change happens in these databases, Solar has, the downstream system has to be updated. So just to ensure the link is working fine, like these data migration scripts helped us big time.
So we still had some end-to-end tests that would cover the entire flow. The diagram is small because we had very few tests basically.
So we just had one or two tests in the corner, just to ensure everything put together. We have to ensure the hardware software integration, the DB with service integration, or the endpoints talking to each other. If everything is working fine, if all the integration software and hardware integration points are working fine, just to ensure that, we just had 2 or 3 tests running in this end-to-end model. And we always ensure that it doesn't go more than 2 or 3 tests. There is a urging tendency, given that we had worked in a model of putting tests into end-to-end for a so long time, it is an urging tendency for me to put tests into end-to-end. We have to cautiously avoid that. So the missing piece, that's what you told, the integration thing. So what happens is, as you've seen, like we had tested all these components separately. Okay, so what happens if a contract of one service changes and other thing is not updated? Okay, so even here in this end-to-end test, we don't have exhaustive tests to cover all different endpoints or all different contracts. We didn't had, and this is not advisable to have these tests here. So what we did was, we introduced something called contract test. So, okay, so Stubbs are the guy who is talking to other systems, like he's like a proxy for the service. Okay, so introduce something called a contract test. What it will do is, it will hit the same endpoint to the app and the Stubby4j, and it will compare the validate the JSONs for their structure. So these structures should match. Okay, so let's assume someone had changed Java service. They had either changed the endpoint or response JSON. Okay, so what would happen if we don't have this structure in place? Okay, so this Java service would continue to exist, and my UI test, they would continue to pass, but when I go into production, they would fail, because this guy is giving something and this guy is expecting something. So just to bridge that gap, we introduced this contract test. Yes, that's pretty much all.
So, one question. Like, how did you make sure that you have a sufficient coverage with this kind of approach? I mean, the end-to-end test cases might have, like, it is hitting maybe 10,000s of lines of code, and maybe 100 classes, 2,000 methods, and maybe this. So you have to present some data to your upper management. You have to convince them. So what kind of data did you give?
Okay. So basically, we didn't have a upper management to convince. So that's one point.
The upper management and then you deleted the regression.
Okay, so it's more about discipline. So me saying that like we have broken down our test into integration test, contract test, UI test. It's all about discipline, and more than discipline, if we have code coverage tools in place. Okay, so to ensure our integration tests are covered fully, what we do is actually we hadn't implemented that. Like we are about to implement it. So what is the idea that we have in mind is, so we would capture all the possible endpoint that a service gives. Okay, and what we would do is we would actually run the test and we would capture all the endpoints that had hit in a test, and we want to match these two, and we want to see have we covered all these things. Okay, and for contractors same, yeah. So all possible endpoints we would hit and see if you had covered it.
So actually see, this is not your, if you look at the test pyramid, you've got rid of the topmost layer of functional tests of sort.
No, we
And I'll tell you
hadn't-
why.
We didn't got rid of it.
No, I'll tell you why this concept is what comes in my mind, right? These to me are very good tests in terms of getting quick feedback. These are not your true functional tests on the top of the pyramid. These are more of your view tests, which you are hitting very specific components, checking that functionality, and giving the most quickest feedback. The challenge that I see in this approach, it's probably good if a system has not really gone live of sorts, there's no real data, production data of sorts. What you're relying on a lot is on the APIs or factory call or whatever that the devs have created in terms of creating test data. But you're not really checking if the system works. All these different pieces work with real data. There's only a certain set of functionality you can validate with created data, which is not real. There could be a disconnect.
Okay, I would disagree. Reason being, we have tested in all layers. So okay, so when can we introduce different data into the system? That's through migration script. Okay, we have thorough tests to test migration scripts. So, and whenever a developer writes a repository layer, he consider all different different combinations that could come in, and he would write unit tests to cover all these combinations. If he hadn't wrote functionality to handle these combinations, then it's not fair for me to assume my system would handle it. So
Point of contention, we agree to disagree, we'll talk offline on that one. The other aspect which I think is missing, which is important in that sense, is you are writing at the top layer again of the pyramid, which is the smallest test in numbers of sort, to cover the widest breadth of the product. A couple of your end-to-end tests that you have, just a few, 1 or 2 or 3, that is very important to have to bridge that gap, to make sure the fewest number of tests cover the widest breadth of the product. Right? What is very important, and I hope you are doing this for sure, is when a product is built and deployed in some environment, when you're running those end-to-end tests, it's not just validating the workflow of sorts, but it's actually validating the business functionality which is expected out of the product. Because with the individual tests, again, it's very granular, and you're missing out that big picture why it's really great.
I have a question.
I actually am very sorry. We are running out of time.
I have a hand up from the
We are running out of time, and they'll be here. You can ask your questions to them later. We have lightning talks which will start downstairs in like a few minutes. So please, everyone, I would request you all to gather downstairs in track 1. Before that, let's give them a round of applause. And please do not forget to give them feedback. The feedback URLs and QR codes have been put up everywhere. Don't forget to do that. And I'm very sorry, sir. Please,